Right. Hi, welcome to the program. If you're just joining us on YouTube and Twitch, I don't know what happened, but usually it takes all three automatically, and for some reason, they were unchecked. They were unchecked. So this morning, we're now broadcasting live on YouTube again. Hey, thank you, Kathy. I didn't see that. I don't know what happened. Wait. Didn't you go last break? Remember, job's not finished till the paperwork's done. I almost had a panic attack because there was almost no paper to do the paperwork. You know what I mean? Run Silent, Run Deep. That was the other one. The Abyss. Well, that was good, but no, there was one that was like, there was one in the mid 80s, early to mid 80s. And I don't remember what it was. I think it was Gray Lady Down. I think is one of the, anyway, it was spooky. Definitely got my attention and gave me the heebs. All right, we got to go. Back with more of the Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio. Like it, share, like it, follow, ring the bell. Here we go. Okay, welcome back to the program. Yeah, that was it. I was right. We were just talking about the movie that I don't that the whole submarine thing kind of freaks me out a little bit, right? I had no idea that I had the potential to be claustrophobic. I'm not normally. I mean, but there have been a few times in my life when I've been in some pretty tight squeezes, and but one of the things that really gave me kind of, and I had nightmares about it, was a movie, and I couldn't remember what it was. And then I came up with a name. It was, and of course, everybody in the chat room's throwing submarine movies at me. You know, Run Silent, Run Deep, The Abyss, Hunt for Red October, just all these different, K-19. And, I mean, no, all those were made. This is the movie that I was thinking about was Gray Lady Down. Chuck Heston, David Carradine, Stacy Keach, Ned Beatty, Christopher Reeve. That movie was, I mean, for a kid who was 12 years old, I think, probably 12, 13 years old when I watched it, that movie was scary. That movie scared me because of the water, and it was just inexorable, right? Just that's the problem with that kind of stuff is you got nowhere to go. You're in a submarine. You can't get out. You can't go somewhere. It's not like you can open the door and take a cab somewhere. I think that's what it was more than anything else, the lack of control. Anyway, sorry, that was my my whole thing there. All right, well, let's go over to the phones. I got a line on hold here, and we've been talking about the governor's budget and the reaction to it. Let's continue on, and we'll see what you have to say. We go over here. Good morning. Who's this? Where are you calling from? Hello. Hello. Jason, is that you, Jason? I can hear you, Jason.
From Fairbanks.
Hey, Jason, how you doing?
Okay. Yeah, that was the movie Gray Lady Down. I was going to give you the title for. My Uncle Henry was a submariner. It's not submariner, but submariner. He cracked up during World War II when they got depth charge for that very reason. There's nowhere to run. Even if you're in a foxhole and you're being mortared or shelled, it may be, leaving your post, but you can still go somewhere. Whereas in a submarine, there's nowhere to go. All you can do is hope like hell you don't get a depth charge go off under you. And he also said it doesn't sound like they sound like in the movies. He said you hear a click and then you hear what sounds like a very loud ringing of a bell. And he said if it goes off under you, you're done for. If it's to the side or above, you can survive. But if it's under you, the hull will just collapse into that bubble of gas that the explosion makes. So he
Right.
knew of what he spoke.
Right. No, I think that's really what it is. I think it's the idea of you can't escape. Like you said, if you're in a foxhole and there's shells raining down, it may be stupid and it may be, your dereliction of duty to
Suicidal.
run out into that, but at least you can run somewhere. But in a submarine, you in the dark, no one can hear you scream, kind of thing. It's
Oh
like, oh
yeah.
my God, that's just, it was. I mean, like I
Oh yeah.
said,
You drown in the darkness, literally.
yeah, no, and it's definitely one
And
of those things
the
that,
deepest dive ever made by a manned vehicle was the Trieste in 1960. They went down 7.5 miles into the Marianas Trench. The vehicle was essentially an underwater blimp, a hull filled with gasoline, where it had no bubble air spaces, so there was no net pressure. And then the crew module was a spherical bath escape on the underside, very much like a blimp, but made for underwater use. And it had ducted thrusters, or actually just propellers, but still, they said it's totally black as night down there. There is no,
yeah,
the creatures down there do not have color, and most of them don't have eyes because there's no light to see by down there.
yeah, no, it's crazy. It's a whole new. I've watched, like I said, for a hot minute, I thought I wanted to be an oceanographer because I love the ocean and I love that, and so I did a lot of reading when I was a kid. Jacques Cousteau was my constant companion, and as the things
Oh
progressed
yeah.
and as the technology progressed, and we got more and more pictures and videos of the undersea trenches and the thermal vents and all the other kind of stuff. I mean, you realize what a different world. I mean, don't travel to different solar systems to look at different worlds. Let's go to the bottom of the deepest part of the ocean and take a look at a whole different world down there. Like,
And there may be life under the ice of the moons of Jupiter.
oh yeah, you've got no idea. I mean, you got thermivores down on the bottom of the ocean who basically are eating the heat, right? I mean, they're eating the heat and the sulfurs and the
Yeah.
particles out of the vents down there. And there's all kinds of crazy stuff that we just don't even know about right here in our own backyard. But God bless the man who decides to go all the way down to the bottom of that in some kind of super secret, suit that could withstand that kind of pressure. I mean, that's
Oh
just,
yeah.
it's crazy. But it's interesting to think
And
about.
yeah, one last thing too. Did you get the Speaking of What If Wednesdays, did you get the emergency flashlight I had sent to you?
I don't know if I did. Maybe my wife's got a pile of mail for me downstairs. I don't know. I haven't looked yet. I'll take a look at it and see.
The
I'll keep.
cylindrical. Okay, your charges with a solar cell, a hand crank, and other by other means also, and it's the best one for the money I have yet found. And since you're doing the What If Wednesdays again, I'm going to be listening with great interest to the medical one today. But as far as having communications, that's a good device too. Plus, it can recharge cell phones also. But yeah, take a look at your mail because I got a notice from eBay that you got it. So you
Okay.
got it somewhere in the house.
Well, I
Yeah,
appreciate it. Thank you. I'll take a look at it. We'll do
you're
a
welcome.
field test here in the studio with it and check it out. I appreciate that. Thanks, Jason.
Okay.
Appreciate you.
Have a good morning.
Thank you, my friend. I appreciate it. 907-433-3150, 907-433-3150. If you'd like to sound off, we got just a few minutes before the end of the hour here. And then we're going to pick it up with the folks from Jase Medical. Dr. Shawn Rowland will be talking with us about emergency medicine, emergency medical preparedness. And he's, in fact, I see that he's actually coming in a little bit early this morning. He just hit the green room, but we are coming up at the top of the hour break. So we'll have a chitty chat with him during the commercial break. And then when we come back, we will start fresh with him on that. What If Wednesdays, of course, the next segment coming up is something that I did for many years when I was only on the air in Fairbanks up in the interior. And we've done it a few times here on the show. But I decided to pick it back up because we really need to kind of go through this, take a look and talk about, the last week, with the shutdown at the port of Seattle and what's going on with, what's going on with the supply chain issues and just coming out of the pandemic and what that had to do with the supply chain issues and how, we're reminded about how far we are up here in Alaska anyway, how far we are down at the end of the chain, right? I mean, we're at the very, very end of the supply chain, and we don't we don't really think about that in terms of our just in time delivery and everything that's going on here. It is it's kind of a precarious position. I wanted to cut out this little segment from The Expanse that talks about the difference between it's a simple complex system where the cascade failure can create problems. And that's kind of what we're looking at today with just-in-time delivery and many of the other things that we're going to be faced with that could be problematic. And the things that we don't think about, we may need on our shelves. And, medicines are one thing. We're going to talk with Dr. Rowland about that here in a few minutes, but it could be something as simple as feminine hygiene products. It could be something as simple as batteries for those flashlights that you were just talking about. Do you have a solar, have some kind of solar alternative that you can use? Not that necessarily is going to help you if you're up in Fairbanks in the middle of winter because there basically is no sunlight. Do you have some ways to cook your food? I mean, camp stoves, gas, cartridges, or regular white gas stoves? Do you have either or both? There's just all different kinds of things that you need to do to prepare. And by the way, you should be familiar with these things, which means every now and then you should take them out and start working with them, because the last place you want to be is having to try and figure out how those things work in the midst of an emergency. That's part of the problem as well. So we're going to talk about all this, but today the focus for What If Wednesday is going to be on medical emergencies and medical, I guess, consumables that you should be thinking about. And it's not always, stuff that's sexy, but it is stuff that will make your life oh so much better as we go through. So we're going to continue in just a moment. Dr. Rowland from Jase Medical is going to be joining us, and we are going to have those discussions in just a minute. Up against the top of the hour, we're back with more. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. We'll continue right after these messages. If you got to go, we'll see you tomorrow. Be kind, love one another, live well. Otherwise, we'll be back with hour 2 right after this. Okay, well, we're ready to go here. Dr. Shawn Rowland is in the green room. Let's dive down into that, shall we, and get things ready to go, and bring him on board, and we'll get all set up here. All right, we'll go here. Good morning, sir. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing good. I get. I'm hearing myself back here. Let me get a little bit of an echo. Let me see if me or you. Hold on a second. Try that. And look at that. That was me, not you. All right. Good morning, Doctor. Thanks for coming on board. We are pretty excited about this. I've had a lot of requests for more What If shows, and I thought this would be perfect. And then somebody in my chat room told me about Jase and pointed me in your direction and said they had been customers and were patients, so we're very happy with that. And so I'm happy to have you on the program here. We're about 5.5 minutes here from, we got the top of the hour news and then a commercial break, and then we come back. But we're ready to go. You just got done talking to Steve Bannon on the War Room. That must have been fun.
Yeah, I've been on there a handful. Do I have an echo? No, I've been on there a handful of times. Going on again tomorrow. But yeah, he's always fun to get into China with.
Yeah, talking about China. Are you is the topics there you're talking about coronavirus, or what are you guys talking about when you talk with him?
Yeah, it is. Well, I mean, it's all things China related and Communist Party related, and kind of their pulling all the different strings and how that's related. Specifically, usually it's tied to our supply chain. I mean, and it's actually kind of part of the genesis story of Jase goes back to kind of my revelations with where our medications are coming from and how our industry basically completely got, we got out of it in the United States, and China was there to pick it up. So yeah, there's some interesting rabbit holes to go down there.
Well, supply chain dependency is definitely one of the things that I am most concerned about, because, again, we live in a society that has developed over the last 30 years into this simple, complex system. The idea of just-in-time delivery. I mean, I remember going into a grocery store when I was younger and working in the back where there's, the front half of the store was only about, well, it was half, maybe a third of the store. And the back half of the store was all storage. It looked like a Costco in the back because they kept everything on hand. And of course, over the last 30 years, that's changed and changed and changed. And now you're lucky to find a 20-foot wide aisle in the back of a store because everything else is out on the shelf and everything is delivered every 3 days. And if something interrupts that, ooh, baby, do we have a problem?
Yeah, absolutely. No, yeah, you're right on the money. The way I then think though, like, because it affects everything, right? It's across the board in every industry. But we heard about, I mean, I guess because it was right in our face, but we heard about and we experienced no toilet paper, and then we talk about not being able to get a car because we can't get computer chips and appliances that take 2 years on a waiting list, and it goes on and on and on. But we're not really talking about medications, and we are there's and I talked about this on Bannon's show too. Right now in America, there's a cancer doctor having a discussion or to decide, am I going to use the limited amount of cancer medication that we have because it's been on shortage for years? Am I going to use this to treat the baby with brain cancer or the older lady with lung cancer? And both of them should be treated and can be treated, but we don't have enough medication. And so having to make these kinds of decisions, or you have a child with an ear infection, you went to the pharmacy last winter and you couldn't get a basic antibiotic. These are experiences, like shortages we're experiencing right now, and we're just not talking about. I mean, you mentioned, yeah, in 3 days the shelves are bare. How about when we're talking about insulin? And these are things that we need to live on a daily basis, not conveniences of life. And
right, you're not talking about going hungry. You're not talking about being a little hungry or being a little thirsty. You're talking about insulin where you're life threatening if you don't get your shot. And yeah, definitely a problem for sure. All right, well, we're coming up on it here. Doc, I'm going to go ahead and put you back in the green room for just a second. Hold on the line here. We're going to get things ready to go. Dr. Steve Rowland is our guest. We're going to continue with him. He's the founder and CEO of Jase Medical, and you can find them at jasemedical.com, and we'll get some details from him on that as well. And this is just going to kind of be a free-ranging discussion with the doctor on kind of medical preparedness, what's going on today, what could happen, and then what the solution is. And maybe not just in some of the things that, common medications that we should have, common medications that we should be putting in our shelves. If you're going to go down and buy one box of Imodium, maybe you should buy two, kind of thing, and then real, other types of medicine, more heavy duty antibiotics, maybe some painkillers, maybe some analgesics, some ointments, things maybe that you need to actually see a doctor for to be able to get it, or things like life-threatening drugs like insulin or others that are, maybe in short supply. So we'll talk with Dr. Rowland about that here in just a moment. Folks, please like and share the show, like and follow the show page, and make sure you subscribe and ring the bell on YouTube. We're coming back into it. It's going to be hour 2 here in just a second. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Don't forget, those of you who are on Facebook, don't forget to subscribe. But we're still trying to hit that 1,000 subscriber mark on YouTube. Almost 4,000 people on Facebook. Trying to get some of you to go over to YouTube. You don't have to stay there. You can come back, and it's all good. It's all good. Here we go. Jumping back into it. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking Hump Day Radio. What If Wednesday up next.
buddy, put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That was just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
Yep. Live around the world on the interwebs at michaeldukeshow.com and across the state of Alaska on this, your favorite radio station and or FM translator. Hour 2 of the big radio broadcast, and we are ready to go for our What If Wednesday segment. Now, What If Wednesday? That means what if? What if there is a major power outage? What if there is a, global thermonuclear war, zombie apocalypse, or just, I don't know, the 2018 earthquake, only worse? Maybe another Good Friday tsunami? Maybe, name the mass coronal ejection. I don't know. I just don't know. Or maybe just a coronavirus issue with a supply chain issue thrown in and a dependency on foreign supply chains on top of that. Maybe that would create the problem. What If Wednesday is just our chance to look at all the different things and make sure that you have what I like to call the Alaskan mindset. The Alaskan mindset of just being prepared for kind of any eventuality. I never knew growing up that that's what people called preppers or preparedness or survivalists or whatever, because again, my grandmother was born up 100 miles north of Fairbanks during the gold rush, and that was just kind of the way they lived. They always had a few months worth of food on the shelf. Even when she was 80 years old, living in her condominium all alone, you opened up her pantry and there was probably 5-6 months worth of food there. It's just one of those things where it's just a way of life and you don't even think about it. So we like to ask those questions. Well, today we're going to talk about medical preparedness, because we can always talk about, when it comes to preps, it's always like food and ammo and blah, blah. But one of the things that we don't usually talk about is medicines, because a lot of us out there require medicines to not just for peace of mind, not just for quality of life, but some of us for to live. I mean, like it's the thing keeping us alive. And for some, maybe a bad bout of something that would today be fixed easily if we didn't have access to those medicines could be painful and or life-threatening. So to join us today to discuss this is Shawn Rowland, who is the founder and CEO of Jase Medical. He's a doctor, board-certified family medical physician. He's trained at academic institutions and community hospitals across the country, and he has extensive experience administering care to underserved populations. He's had experience working on the southern border during the COVID, and that ultimately led him to forming Jase Medical as a means of furthering his mission to empower everyone to be better prepared medically. And so let's welcome Dr. Shawn Rowland here onto the program and get started with our discussion today. Good morning, doctor. Thanks for coming on board.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
First things first, I always have to take these shows a little bit tongue in cheek because, like I said, being born and raised in Alaska and being from a family of sourdough gold miners, I didn't realize that it was weird to everybody else that I happened to have a bunch of food on my shelf, and that I had some water stashed away, and that I had some, extra toilet paper and maybe some extra medicine, that I had an emergency kit. I mean, to me, that was not weird. That was just kind of how I was raised, right? But then you got into it like into the early 90s and up to Y2K, and everybody's freaking out about Y2K, and I'm like, this is just how I am. And they're like, oh no, it's all those survivalists and everything. I didn't realize there was actually a term for that, up until that point. But today it's, it's kind of more top of the mind. And we, of course, see the things, the Walking Dead and all the zombie apocalypse and the dystopian shows and everything. And so people are kind of thinking about it, but still it kind of holds a stigma. We're trying to just bring it down to a basic, understandable level and realistic level here. There's some real problems. And you started Jase Medical. Tell us a little bit about the foundation of that, the genesis of that whole thing, and why you got started in emergency medical preparedness as a doctor. What drove you into that, and give us your thoughts on kind of the preparedness aspect of it.
Absolutely. I wonder if we've maybe come partially full circle when it comes to that perception of preparedness, where now I think nowadays you're much more likely to find people that would actually just term it as something as prudence, right? As it was back as you were explaining when you were growing up. And so, and that was, I think that's largely thanks to COVID, and people finally living through and some of these the pain points that COVID caused with regards to access to just everyday supplies. And really that plays a part in kind of the genesis story for Jase Medical. This goes back pre-COVID. So this was, 2017, 2018. I was working in a community hospital pre-pandemic. Life is good. We live in the land of plenty, and things like access to toilet paper was just not on anyone's radar. And same with access to medications. So here I am in this hospital, and I remember the first meeting we had in the morning. We have everyone gets together. The pharmacist in the hospital comes in, and he comes in and explains that we're running a little low on a few things. And one of them was a pretty important antibiotic, an IV antibiotic that we used routinely as one of our big guns to kind of save people who were really sick. And at the time, and it happened once, and then it happened again, and I started to think, what's going on here? We're in this first tier healthcare system, and I can't get some of these basic supplies, these basic medications. What is going on? So that led me to kind of dig into where our medications come from, and what's going on in that supply chain. And what I found out was that here in the United States, we have virtually no capacity to manufacture any kind of a generic medication. And it turns out that generic medications account for about 95% of what is prescribed on a daily basis in the United States. So about 95% of what we consume every day, medication-wise, could be classified as a generic medication. So where are those medications made? Well, it turns out that the active pharmaceutical ingredients, the active component of those medications, for the most part, is produced out of China, with a few other countries sprinkled in there. But China really has the majority when it comes to manufacturing of those active ingredients. Now, fast forward to COVID, and I relocated my family. We moved back to the state, to Utah, which is where we were originally from. And it's COVID. Things are horrible. You can't get anything, and we didn't know this first winter it was going to be COVID plus the flu. I mean, things were getting dark pretty quick. And so that's when I dug in, not only to where our medications come from, but how much do they really cost? And found out that, and this is because I was starting my own practice, I needed to kind of stock up on medications for my practice. And for the first time as a physician, looking into what medications really cost, and found out that the generics are actually really cheap. They're really accessible. So I wanted to get myself supplied, my practice. And then I had this feeling, I actually felt a little bit guilty. I was like, okay, well, I feel good, I'm prepared. But what about my parents? What about my friends, my neighbors, my community? And that's ultimately what led to Jase Medical, where I finding a way that I could take the same preparations that I had done for myself and my practice, and allow that to take place for my patients. So came up with a list of 5 antibiotics. What are the most important antibiotics to have on hand? You can't have the whole pharmacy. There's costs to consider, there's safety to consider, but what are the 5 that could cover the most common bacterial illnesses, as well as the most deadly. And that ultimately led to the Jase case. And I'm sure we'll talk more about that. But that's how Jase became Jase.
And again, that's fascinating. It's interesting to me to watch people who who come to this mindset all of a sudden. Like all of a sudden, it's like a light dawning on them when they realize that the supply chain in this country is fairly fragile. And when they see that and you see that light go off and all of a sudden they realize that, yes, we are a first world nation, first tier, right? I mean, it doesn't get much better than being in America. But when they realize how fragile it is, they go, oh, wow. And it's a little spooky. It's a little scary. But as I've said for many years, preparedness brings peace. You get a little peace of mind once you start to prepare for these things, and it makes a lot more sense and things get better. But as you talk to your patients and I'm assuming you talk to people in your sphere of influence and some of your patients, what was their reaction when you started to lay out some of these truths about what was going on?
Well, yeah, great. That's a question I haven't really gotten before, but it's a great one because, I could say maybe two things. On the one hand, I don't think I've ever talked to anyone, not to say they're not out there, but in my experience, that wasn't shocked when they found out that all of their medications were produced overseas, mostly in China. It's just not something that anyone had thought about and immediately caused concern, right, for everyone who hears it. But then just talking about what we offer when it comes to access to prescription medications for emergency preparedness, everyone immediately comes up with kind of in their experience, I would have loved to have that on my last trip to wherever they were, in some travel situation, or oh man, my grandma lives in New York City and she's in a high-rise apartment. And when she gets sick, it's so hard to go out and get her medications. It's just everyone has their quick go-to, or, oh man, I've been preparing for my whole life. I've got my food storage, my water and my ammo, everything. But oh my gosh, I don't have any prescription medications, or I've had to go down to Mexico. So everyone's got their own use case that immediately pops to mind. But what's, I guess, the common thing there is that everyone immediately sees oh my gosh, this is either how could I have not considered this? But wow, this is something that I really need.
I want to talk a little bit. So first, I want to tease just a little bit about the Jase case. Tell us exactly what that is. And then I want to get into, in the next segment, we're coming up on the break here in a minute, but in the next segment, I want to dive down into some regular medications and some over-the-counter things that we don't think about, that we're just not really considering, and then get into some deeper use cases on prescription meds and stuff. But talk for a minute about the Jase case. You've mentioned it a couple times. I've seen it on your website. Tell us exactly what that is.
Sure. So the Jase case was kind of our go-to-market offering service. And what it is as I mentioned, it's 5 different antibiotics, looking at in a scenario where you don't have access to healthcare for any number of reasons. What are the most likely things that would need to be treated? And then what are some of the most deadly? And specifically in that regard, we're talking about bioterror agents, things like anthrax, plague, tularemia. These are the agents that have been identified by the government as the most likely that may be used in a bioterror event. And so the 5 antibiotics, I quickly mention them for those who are kind of aware of the names, but there's amoxicillin clavulanate, that's Augmentin. There is azithromycin, ciprofloxacin, doxycycline, and metronidazole. And we do it in an amount that you can treat. It's intended for one adult to be able to cover anything that could happen in over a year's period. So it's a decent amount of medication. And we can get into more about kind of specifically some of the things it treats. But
Sure.
You mentioned before, it was about how things have kind of how we're just used to being able to treat these everyday illnesses, specifically bacterial illnesses. It wasn't that long, 100 years ago, the top 3 killers in the United States or in the world were all bacterial related. And we've just gotten so used to having these tools at our disposal. But in a situation, a grid down situation or anything like that, those things are going to resurface, come right back to the top. And so being prepared to be able to treat these kinds of things. It's vital. It's got to be a part of everyone's prudent preparations.
This is the Jase case. We're going to talk a little bit more about that in a bit. Dr. Shawn Rowland is our guest with Jase Medical. You can find him at jasemedical.com, Jase. And we're going to come back to him in just a moment with some more questions and more discussions on our What If Wednesday. We're talking about emergency medicine. When we return, we'll hit on some over-the-counter things that you probably aren't thinking about right now, but could be, if not life-saving, at least quality of life-saving in the event of any kind of interruption, supply chain disaster, or whatever. So we're going to continue with that here in just a moment. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Back with Shawn Rowland right after this.
Running on 100% pure beard power. Oh, also some coffee. We dip our beard in coffee.
Ha, nice beard.
The Michael Duke Show.
Okay, continuing now with Dr. Rowland here from Jase Medical as we discuss this. As we go through. Do you need a prescription to order these antibiotics, high blood pressure meds, et cetera? Yes, and we're going to talk about the specifics of that here in just a bit with Dr. Rowland. But I want to go back since we're in the break, and it's just you and me and 70 of our closest friends on Facebook and YouTube and everywhere else. I want to go back again to the genesis of this and to talk about. I mean, do you have a regular practice still, or are you focused exclusively now on emergency medicine, doctor?
Yeah, at this point, I'm focused exclusively on Jase and our mission. It's become a full-time endeavor.
Yeah, that must be different, a change, especially coming out of community medicine and working with people and doing all that. It must have been a hard decision.
Yeah, I went into we call it direct primary care, and it's a model of healthcare delivery that is kind of the end around insurance companies, and I did it because it allows for a lot more of a relationship with your patients because you're not limited by time, and so yeah, I still do a lot of charitable care. Just because, yeah, you can't let it go all the way.
Yeah, no, it'd be hard to let go of, especially patients you've seen or known for a long time. And definitely direct primary care. We had a doctor on here who is one of the national advocates for that here a couple months ago.
Oh, perfect.
And yeah, it's a model that I believe we should be embracing. Many of us should be embracing. Even those of us that have insurance should be embracing it because, again, we're no longer just a number. My daughter ended up in the emergency room this week for something, and my wife was just so frustrated. 4 hours of poking and prodding and tests and scans and blood work and everything else, and then they're like, "Nope, it's all good. Go home." And she was just like, she said, I felt like such a number the whole time. We sat in one point, she said, we sat in that room for almost 2 hours waiting for somebody to come back and talk to us. And she said, it's so frustrating. So we need to kind of go back to that, not necessarily house calls, but that feeling of, the doctor's there to care for you and he doesn't have 15 patients stacked up outside waiting to take your place kind of thing. I think that's good. Now, give us a little bit of a tease here. You have the Jase case, which of course is the emergency medical, but you guys also offer a reoccurring for daily prescription, things like that as well.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. Going to market first with the Jase case, we did that for the last couple of years. And then just recently, actually in May, we launched what we call our Jase Daily service. And this is basically getting up to a year's supply of your whatever daily medication you take for a chronic condition. So we're talking about things like your blood pressure medication, cholesterol, thyroid, diabetes, seizure disorders, your anxiety, depression. Really, it's a pretty long list, but offering that up to year supply of those because it's the same thing. These are generic medications. They're coming from the same places as these antibiotics, and they're just as and some people have already. A lot of people who take medications on a daily basis have already experienced to some degree a shortage where it's hard for the pharmacy to get them. And so, yep, this same for the same reasons. That's why we've got the Jase Daily service now, and we're expanding it on a daily basis as we add meds to that list.
Yeah. Well, I know a couple people who during the pandemic had to change their blood pressure medication because they couldn't get the one that was working for them and they had to use one that was less effective. But the bottom line is the pharmacies just could not get it. And so therefore they had to change it. And that is that's a scary thing. It's crazy. And being outside the realm of the control of the insurance companies, where they'll only give you a set number at a time and you better like it
Exactly.
if nothing else. That's part of the problem as well. Okay, so Dr. Rowland's our guest, Shawn Rowland with Jase Medical. We're going to jump back into it here. We are ready to go. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Like and share this show, if nothing else. Let's get back to it. Here we go. No, I mean right now. Here we go.
Public enema number one. Oh, wait, sorry. Public enemy number one, which makes more sense. On the other hand, he's a little bit of a pain in the Michael Duke Show.
I don't no idea what you're talking about. It's totally pain-free. This show is okay, maybe I lied there. Welcome back to the program. It is the Michael Duke Show, broadcasting live across the state of Alaska. This your favorite radio station and or FM translator. It is What If Wednesday. Your chance to ponder the idea of what if, and then you could fill in the blank. And it could be anything from massive earthquake to tidal waves to pandemic, supply chain issues, coronal mass ejection, or yes, even the zombie apocalypse. If that's your so be it. That's what you want to think about. But our question is on different things and how do you get prepared for that? Today, we're talking about medicines. Joining us on the program, Dr. Shawn Rowland from Jase Medical, who just gave us a little bit of his background of where he came from and why he decided to form Jase Medical. And he talked a bit about the Jase case, which is his emergency medical kit with antibiotics for any situation. It's a good discussion. But I wanted to talk for just a minute first about over-the-counter medications, because while we are concerned, obviously, about major infections, bacterial, viral, all the things that are the worst case scenarios, a lot of times we don't think about, just over-the-counter stuff. Now, for example, if you're in a situation where you have to get into your food supplies, and I know a lot of people are not, I prep a little differently than a lot of people. I didn't buy 63 buckets from, I don't know, Patriot Supply or somebody to eat. I have regular canned food and things like that, so it's easier for me. But if you start subsisting on a lot of those freeze-dried, dehydrated, specialty foods and things like that, your body's not really ready for that. So all of a sudden, your gas or your GI tract may not be necessarily happy, and then you'll be wishing that you'd bought an extra box of, say, Imodium or something like that. What are some of the things that you would recommend if you're talking to people stocking up on over-the-counter medicines that they should be writing down on a list to take, to make sure that if they go to buy one, maybe they buy two and throw an extra one on the shelf, so to speak?
Gosh, this is something I have to be careful not to get into the weeds of, because I get pretty passionate about not just explaining which medications, but the why behind it. I have done kind of a whole course of about this in the past, but just to highlight a few here, talking about over the counter, and really when just kind of what is your general approach here, and I think the mindset should be these are things that you're looking at. Yes, comfort, that's important. But things that are going to, when problems start, that are going to hopefully help that problem from becoming a true emergency, where you are going to need something that's prescription strength, or a facility like a hospital. And so you've mentioned a couple of times Imodium, That's loperamide. That's an anti-diarrheal. So in the case of some kind of gastroenteritis, you're throwing up, you've got diarrhea, letting that go in an austere environment could potentially lead to something to dehydration, and then that has its chain reaction, right? So that's one that should be on the list. A good antihistamine, and what you'll see in a lot of publications, you'll hear to have some Benadryl, some diphenhydramine on hand. The truth is nowadays we have better medications. The diphenhydramine or Benadryl is a first gen antihistamine. So there's some newer stuff that doesn't have all of the nervous system side effects like drowsiness and other things that Benadryl has. So I'm talking about really just Zyrtec, Claritin. So that's loratadine, cetirizine, having a good second gen antihistamine on hand. A steroid cream, something you can get those over the counter. Gosh, what else? Those are kind of my top over the counter. And then of course, something to control pain. And sometimes we say pain is, well, that's just a comfort measure. But actually it's one of those things that as it gets worse, it can lead to other complications. And so having a good pain medication over the counter, we're just talking about Tylenol and ibuprofen. So acetaminophen, and ibuprofen. And there's been a lot of really interesting studies done over the last few years that have looked at the efficacy of combining. So taking a Tylenol and taking ibuprofen together at the same time. They go through different pathways in the body. They're filtered by different, you've got the Tylenol goes through your liver, the ibuprofen goes through your kidneys. Safe to take them together, and they found a synergistic effect where in many cases it can be as effective as something as strong as morphine. So having both Tylenol and ibuprofen. Now you do need to consider your own health in all of this. You may be someone with some degree of kidney failure. Well, you're going to want to avoid ibuprofen, or vice versa with liver failure. So you do need to consider other personal health. This is kind of speaking generally, without getting into someone's specific health situation. But gosh, I could keep going, but I don't.
Sure. Well, I mean, I think those are some of the highlights. I mean, you don't want to be dehydrated, so an Imodium is good. Any kind of anti-nausea med is good. You've got antibiotic ointment. I mean, that's a must-have for any kind of surface, that kind of stuff. I mean, you don't want that to get infected deeper than what it already is, right?
Yeah. Well, so this is some of the stuff I get into it's never good to come on and correct the host.
No, go ahead. That's why you're here. You're much more, you're smarter on this than I am for sure.
So that's another one, maybe a common misconception. Neosporin has made a lot of money with some really clever marketing. None of the studies, when they've looked at Neosporin or anything like that, basically we're talking about topical antibiotic over the counter creams, have ever been shown to actually do anything more than just what good wound care would do. And in fact, they've actually caused more complications than they do avoid infections. It's more common. It's more likely that you'll get a contact dermatitis, which would then could potentially turn into something worse by using Neosporin than you are actually avoiding an infection. So talk to any dermatologist, and they'll be the first to tell you that there's just, you're not getting any benefit. You're only getting the potential for harm there. So yeah, that's a little rant on the Neosporin type creams. But having, and I guess, yes, these are all tools, but none of them work without at least some degree of education and knowledge. Knowing how to properly care for a wound is going to help you worlds more than a cream or an ointment. So, and then we could talk about that in any condition. And I'm not saying people have to go out there and get a medical degree or be a nurse.
Sure.
There's just some basic first aid practices that it would behoove everyone to get familiar with, so that they can use these tools in the right way.
Right. And I know there's been books. I have a book that it's probably 25 years old now called Where There Is No Doctor, and some other ones where they do that. Is there any reading that you recommend for people who are trying to get into this? Are there new manuals or something newer than that work that you would recommend? Do you guys put out something that has, basic medical knowledge and, how to clean, how to do this, how to, don't, like you're saying, don't use this antibiotic on it, the topical, use something else, clean it, wash it, soap and water, put honey on it. I don't know, whatever it is. Tell me, is there something out there?
Yeah, where there is no doctor, that's a great one. It's been updated multiple times. There's a number of wilderness medicine. I think that's another. If you're just looking at a category, treating it, as wilderness medicine is another great direction to go. I don't have. I try to avoid specific mentions. I think what's important is that you find something that whatever grabs your attention, has some good references, is reputable, is great. And we ourselves, we put out, so with our Jase case, we do include a very short emergency use guide for these medications, so that if you can't talk to your doctor, you can't talk to a healthcare professional, you're really out on your own. You don't have a more extensive manual. We've got the short, really accessible, tells you, okay, here's your 5 antibiotics. Here's some things that they treat. Here's how to determine if, diagnose if that's what you've got, and how to treat it. But I explain in the beginning of that manual that this is not a replacement for, there's tomes that have been written over the decades, right? And so I just encourage everyone to go out and find whichever one works for them, and be aware of what's in it. That's typically the advice we give. We publish, on our website, we have a kind of an education blog that we routinely put articles up on, and we do talk about things like wound care, diarrhea. There's all kinds of content there that people can also keep up with.
All right. Dr. Shawn Rowland is our guest from Jase Medical. We're talking about emergency medical preparedness. We're just wrapping up on the over-the-counter stuff. So again, analgesics, so ibuprofen and acetaminophen. We're talking about antidiarrheal Imodium types, some of the antihistamines, and you're saying Claritin and Zyrtec better than Benadryl. And of course, things like, I would say Vaseline, things. There's just some things you don't think about that would help, keeping things covered, wound care, basic bandages, some wraps, some ACE bandages, those kind of things. That's all just over-the-counter stuff that should be in your kit. And there's plenty of lists out there for people who put these together in the past. But anything else that sticks out before we jump ahead?
No, I think covering you covered some of the most important. Anything else after kind of the analgesics, the antihistamines, the antidiarrheals, and you're getting into things that would be nice to have, but I think those are the basics that you've got to have, at least that.
Yeah, at least have that much on hand. And now we need to talk about, again, going back to the Jase case. This is something now in Alaska. It's a little bit different in Alaska. You've probably heard that before if you talk to anybody from Alaska. I have an emergency kit that does have some antibiotics in it, that does have some heavier painkillers and things like that. But because I've worked with my doctor over years and said, hey, I need this, is what I'm doing it for, and this is and through his suggestions, he's done it. It's still a bit of a rigmarole, right? Because you still have to do it. You make that a lot easier because you guys are using the one of the silver linings that came out of the pandemic. You guys are using telemed, right?
Perfect. Yeah, that brings up that question of how do you get a hold of these things? And you're right. That was the COVID really facilitated and helped when we talk about telemedicine, both from a public perception as a viable means of receiving healthcare, as well as from a regulatory standpoint. And that is the process that we use. That's how, when I was first thinking, how can we do this? First, it was, well, can I do this? Is this something that a physician can do? And talking to some peers and realizing in my own practice, of course, I have a good patient, such as yourself, that I've got a relationship with, that comes to me and says, "Hey, doc, we're going overseas on this trip, and I'd love to get some medication for some traveler's diarrhea, and maybe my wife, sometimes she's prone to urinary tract infections. Can we get?" And I think I could say just about every doctor in the country has had that situation and has been fine prescribing a medication before it's necessarily needed. And we're talking specifically about antibiotics here. And so, yeah, let's take that idea and take it to the masses. And how can we do that? And that's telemedicine. So really, the process is really simple. We tried to make it as, I don't need to know when you come to me on the website, you come to our physicians. I don't need to know your full surgical history, your family history with cancer, and I don't need to know a lot of that. There's just some basic things I need to know in order to do this safely and appropriately. And so that's the encounter. So you come to the website, you start this encounter. It, the process takes maybe 10 minutes. We get, your basic information. And then we just want to know, do you have a doctor? Have you seen that doctor recently? Do your kidneys and liver work? Are you allergic to any of these medications? And that's pretty much it. At the end of it, the doctor reviews all that, and you get this Jase case delivered to your door. So the process is a simple telemedicine process. In most states, it doesn't require that we go through an appointment and you have a visit back and forth. Sometimes that, depending on the state, you might have to do that, but in most cases you don't. It's just something you can do entirely just online in your pajamas in the middle of the night. And it's a pretty painless process.
I do all my shopping in my pajamas in the middle of the night, except I don't have the pajamas. So anyway, Dr. Shawn Rowland is our guest. We're going to continue this discussion. We're going to talk a little bit about Jase daily, and then we'll wrap up with some final thoughts on this and general preparedness with the doctor. Dr. Shawn Rowland, Jase Medical. JaseMedical.com is where you go to find out all this information. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio.
We're broadcasting live through a series of tubes.
Allowing all of these entities to provide streaming stuff going on the internet.
Well, it's kind of hard to explain. Sorry. Streaming live every weekday morning on Facebook Live and MichaelDukesShow.com.
Okay, in the break right now, Dr. Rowland continues with us. Doc, let me just throw some things out there, and you can, because you shot me down on the antibiotic one, which is fine. Because you don't know what you don't know. I'm not too afraid to say that I was wrong and I just didn't know. If that's what the studies show, then I just won't buy another tube of antibiotic ointment when the time comes, right? It's all good. But I have all the things that you just talked about. Plus, I've got, some things like tourniquets, quick clot, some female, feminine hygiene products. You got the tampons for the gunshot wounds or whatever it is that you need. And I pulled a lot of that stuff together basically just in case any of those things were needed. But again, the educational component, it's like, for example, using quick clot. Quick clot is very good for saving your life. The problem is for the medical professionals later on, it becomes very difficult because now you have to debride and open and clean and do all that kind of stuff. So you've got to educate yourself on how all that stuff works, right?
Yeah, absolutely. That was the first thing I thought about when you said quick clot. Is exactly that. It's one, like you said, it could potentially save your life. So can packing a wound appropriately with gauze and doing wound packing and compression and those first aid maneuvers, so that you can then not die from sepsis when you've got an infected wound that wasn't properly irrigated and debrided because it's full of quick clot. But yes.
Yeah, which is one of the dangers, right? I mean, this is one of the dangers. The uses of tourniquets, figuring out how that works, basic CPR. I mean, these are all things that should be, and now updated, right? Because there's an updated, when I was taught CPR as a kid, now they've changed it a bit. And I haven't gone through a CPR class in many years, but I know now that they've changed it to, instead of 5 and 5, now it's 10 and 2 or whatever the difference is. But you should get if you don't know how, even in the old way, you don't know how to do the old way, you should at least get some knowledge on that. And education is the best peace of mind. It's the best peace of mind that you can get, is that education on it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, and not being, I think you're absolutely right. Let's stay up to date on things that have been proven to be more effective. If you're talking about CPR, for example. But that doesn't mean that if you are in that situation and oh gosh, I'm going to do CPR wrong. If you're the only one there, you can't do CPR wrong. just as long as you're doing something. And if you're doing it the old way, that's certainly better than doing nothing at all. But that doesn't mean that we should just, be lackadaisical about our education and keeping it updated.
Right.
That's a good reminder.
Exactly. That's what Bill said. Bill's a former ENT. He said, any CPR is good CPR. The alternative is deadly. And Brian said the same thing about super glue, right? Because we've used super glue to do battlefield, kind of wounds or out in the field, but you want to get it all out. Same thing with Quick Clot and everything else. Jeannie asked, what about prednisone? Things like that. Is that something that you guys work with? That's a steroidal, am I right? That's a steroid cream?
Yeah, well, it is a steroid, typically taken orally, as an oral steroid, and steroids in lower concentrations in creams, absolutely. You got to be careful using higher potency stuff as a cream. There's issues with long-term use that can lead you to some complications pretty quick. But prednisone specifically, I would say prednisone and another drug called dexamethasone is basically kind of think of it as a more potent prednisone. This gets into, so we are in the process of releasing basically what we're calling kind of add-ons to our Jase case. So you've got the 5 antibiotics, and then you can add on. We're talking about things like topical steroids, oral steroids, antifungals, antivirals. The list goes on. But yes, those are important. Again, the trick with steroids is using them appropriately. So there really needs to be some education there. And for example, taking a steroid, once you take it for a certain period of time, you can't just stop taking it, because basically you're replacing these hormones that are naturally produced in your body, and your adrenal glands kind of shut down because they don't need it anymore. So if you all of a sudden take it away, you can go into adrenal crisis, and there's some complications there. So you have to taper yourself off, and how long and how much and how that works is where it can get complicated. So I guess as far as should you have it, yes, you probably should, but you need to know how much is safe over what period of time, when we're talking about things like prednisone.
Again, it all comes back then to education and knowing what you have and what you need. And each case is obviously use specific. And I think you guys would work with people on that in helping create those kind of courses, right?
Yeah, exactly. And that's part of, we'd love to just, someone says, well, why don't you add this medication? We could potentially just add it the same day, but we don't want to just, I'm not a pharmacy. I'm not a Walgreens.
Not here to just throw, not just here to throw stuff at people, right?
Yeah.
All right. We're rejoining. Here we go. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio. Like and share, like and follow, ring the bell, do the things. Here we go. All right, we're back here finishing up the show today. It's a What If Wednesday segment. We're talking about emergency medical preparedness. Dr. Shawn Rowland from Jase Medical is with us, jasemedical.com. We talked about the Jase case, which is a series of antibiotics, 5 separate antibiotics that are very common and can be used to treat a whole bunch of different things, along with a guideline and, of course, the telemedicine visit to get everything started. That's about $260 if you want to buy it through Jase Medical, which is a fraction of what it is at a regular brick and mortar store, upwards of $700-800 from another store. And that's for one person. I'm assuming that they could do each one of you individually, maybe get you a discount or whatever. But they also do the Jase Daily, which is for daily medicines. And here's my fear, doctor. I have friends and family who take medications for mental health. And the main fear is, first of all, if you stop those medicines cold turkey, it has devastating side effects to their mental health. And secondly, you know, things like high blood pressure, or you mentioned diabetes or things like that. Those are not quality of life issues. Those are life issues, right? Those are life and death kind of thing. And as I said earlier, the pandemic, I had several friends who had to change medications in the middle of what they were doing because they just couldn't get their medication. So the Jase Daily should take care of some of those things. And are they as affordable and reasonable as what you see in the Jase case? So, and is it the same kind of thing? Telemedicine, meetings, appointment, and then get your medicine kind of thing?
Yeah, really similar. A little more. I don't want to say complicated, but it is a little more complicated because, you know, people's situations are different. Medication dosages are different. So it is a very similar encounter, but just a little bit more involved. And as far as cost goes, yes, you'll find it's very cost effective, but it also varies widely because you might have a medication that you take every day that costs 10 cents a day, or you know, in some of the cases of the older blood pressure medications, or you might be taking something that's a little more expensive. Thyroid medications are typically a little more expensive, and since we're talking about, you know, 365 days, that kind of exponentially can change the pricing. So it really varies. So what we encourage people to do is you go on the site, you can start the encounter for Jase Daily, and you can see right at the beginning, number one, do we have your med as a part of our list? Because not all of the chronic medications are on there. So is it, first of all, can it be prescribed under this model? And number two, what's the cost going to be for the med? And so that's what I would encourage people to do, is just to check, go on the website, start the encounter, and check. You brought up the mental health medications, specifically those SSRIs that are used to treat anxiety and depression. And absolutely, those are, man, those should be at the top of your list. You know, you might have the doctor today who can't get cancer medications, but I can tell you it's going to start being other things like antidepressants, like blood pressure med. We've already seen it in some of these, and it's just going to get worse. So absolutely, nobody should be going cold turkey on their depression medication, not just for the mental side effects. It has actual dangerous physical side effects as well.
Right, because it physiologically changes you as you're taking it, and if you stop taking it immediately, it's like a full blue screen of death system crash. I mean, it's not a good thing.
Yep.
Let's talk about the longevity. We're down to the last 6 or 7 minutes now. Let's talk about the longevity, because most medications are safe even if they're used as they get older, but it's usually the efficacy. There's a few that are not, right? And so do you tell us, you know, how long we should be able to use it? Do you tell us what are safe to use and what are not after a certain period of time, et cetera?
Yeah, that's a great one. I'm glad we brought that up. There's that. You've brought up I love it. Some great questions that some that I hadn't been asked before. Some stuff that I think is really important to talk about, and maybe we just take the last few minutes to talk about what end up being some of the most common questions, and probably the first one that we always get is what you just talked about, and that's expiration dates. And you're right on the money. Some medications can degrade into problematic toxic substances, and that's specifically, there are some old antibiotics. They're still around. The first one that comes to mind is an antibiotic called tetracycline, and it's still around, but that's one that has been shown in the past to, you know, if you take it much further past its expiration date, can lead to things like kidney failure and bad stuff. Now, the interesting thing is so I can speak specifically to the 5 antibiotics in this kit. None of them degrade into toxic substances, and you may have talked about this before in the past, but when we talk about expiration dates, it's important to talk about the government's, the FDA's shelf life extension program, which is something that's been, now it's an ongoing study. It's been going on for quite some time, and really what happened was, you know, the Department of Defense has these massive stockpiles of medications, and they were having to turn this stock over every few years at considerable expense. And so they wanted to say, well, do we really need to be replacing all these medications? Are they really expired? And so they commissioned the FDA to start this study. What the FDA found was some really fascinating results. When we're talking about pills, things like capsules and tablets, as long as they're stored properly, and what that means is just room temperature and dry. So the two things that kill medications quicker than anything else is heat and humidity. As long as you can keep your medications in a cool, dry environment, what they found was that on average, you had a minimum of 5 years beyond their expiration date to where they maintained virtually 100% of their potency, with many of these medications going as far as 15 plus years. And at worst, what you got was what you said, which was maybe they just weren't quite as effective. 80% effective, but still safe to take. So of course we follow the legal regulations from state boards of pharmacies who say that your medication basically has a year from the date it's prescribed. But I encourage people to look into those studies to see how far they can actually make those medications last.
Yeah, cool, dark, and dry is one of my rules when it comes to preparedness and food storage and medicines and everything else. That's the cool, dark, and dry is the lead on that. And yeah, for most part, even amongst we talked about expiration dates and the government mandated expiration dates for many things, and it's amazing how how much we throw away in this country. It's still perfectly good to use. So that's a whole nother show in and of itself. So Dr. Shawn Rowland, final thoughts here as we wrap up 2 minutes. I'll give you the floor. Anything we didn't hit you think we should have? Any questions I didn't ask or anything else?
The last would be the second most common is allergies. What if I have an allergy to one of these medications? And you see if you haven't seen yet that my answers come with a lot of context and nuance, and that's because that's my mission. This empowerment is all about education. Yeah, we want to give people the tools with these medications, but I'm all about educating people about how to use them and why to use them. The antibiotic cream being a good example. So allergies, turns out, so of course, the most common allergy that's reported is penicillin, and amoxicillin, which is in our kit, that augmentin is a penicillin derivative. And for someone who has a true allergy to penicillin, they should not take that medication. Now, in that case, that's why it's a telemedicine visit that's prescribed by a physician. They would substitute that medication for something else. And in this case, it would probably be another azithromycin or Z-Pak. But the interesting thing about the allergy is that of those people who report a penicillin allergy, the studies have shown that it turns out that less than 1% of those people actually have a true allergy to penicillin. And that of that 1%, 80 to 90% of those people will actually lose that sensitivity or that allergy after 10 years. So the most common is someone who was a baby, a child, and maybe had a rash after they had some antibiotics, and their parents said for the rest of their life, hey, you're allergic to penicillin, don't take penicillin. Less than 1% of those people actually still have that allergy. So what I encourage people to do is first we talk to them about what is the nature of their allergy, number one.
Hold on a second, doctor. I'm sorry. We're coming up against the hard break here, so hold the line for the chat room. Folks, we're out of time. Dr. Shawn Rowland, JaseMedical.com, JASE. Check it out. We're out of time. We'll see you tomorrow, The Michael Duke Show. Sorry, Doc. I had a hard break there.
No, sorry.
Because I'm fascinated. That was one thing I forgot to ask about was for not just allergies to medicine, but allergy medicine and things like that. So yeah, go ahead and finish up your thought on that. My brother and my dad are both allergic to penicillin. I mean, my dad has a deathly reaction to penicillin. My brother, not so much. I'm not. I don't know if any of my other siblings are, but it is obviously a problem for some people. So go ahead and finish up your thought on that.
Yeah, great. So really just to finish it up, is what you just said, your father who is legitimately allergic, and we're talking about anaphylaxis in that, someone who has a true anaphylactic reaction, difficulty breathing, their body breaks out in hives, they have swelling around their face or abdomen extremities. That's a real allergy. But even those can, after time, a lot of the times they lose that sensitivity. So what I tell people is first, we want to make sure, are you talking about an allergy, or are you talking about, I get an upset stomach? That's not an allergy to a penicillin. That's a common reaction that most people get when they take antibiotics. I get diarrhea. No, that's not an allergy. So first we want to find out, what are we talking about here? Number one. Number two, if you are in that camp where you're either unsure or that at one point you had a true allergic reaction, We have allergy doctors. They can do testing. They can tell you, yes, you are truly allergic, or you're not. And the reasons why that might be important to do is because you want to have as many options as you possibly can when it comes to medications. If you can take a penicillin type antibiotic instead of a less effective Z-Pak for whatever it is you're dealing with. Sometimes the Z-Pak is more effective. It depends on the disease. But if you've got the option to take the better drug, then why not find out if you can, and not carry that label of, oh, I'm allergic because I was 6 months old when I have this antibiotic, and my parents told me ever since. So that's it. Is it a true allergy, number one, and number two, get tested if you have doubts to find out. Maybe you can be taking these medications. The last that I would have mentioned kind of through this, and it's another thing, like you said, another show probably would be to talk about some of the anti-radiation stuff, specifically the potassium iodine and others. But and yeah, we can.
Well, we'd love to have you back to talk more about it, because again, you mentioned the anti-bio agents and the anti-nuclear stuff. I mean, there's a lot of things to discuss in there, that things that you coulda, woulda, shoulda. I mean, do you keep potassium and iodine supplements? Do you do are you using I have so many questions. Personally, just like, should I be carrying my betadine? Should I be doing some of these other things? Should I, there's just so many questions that are probably outside the norm of something that I would talk to my regular doctor about. But since this is your specialty, I find this a fascinating topic. So we'd like to invite you back on the program sometime again in the future to discuss more about this and give people the opportunity. And I'd like folks to have the opportunity to check out Jase and maybe get the Jase case and then tell us their experiences and things like that. So this would be a good opportunity for a recap or a rejoin later on down the road.
Yeah, we'd love that. And we'd love to hear anytime someone, I mean, we hate that people have to use anything in the kit, but when they do and they have that good outcome, we love to hear those stories.
Especially here in Alaska. I mean, again, Alaska is a little bit different. The whole telemedicine aspect of it, the ability to get those things maybe remotely and things like that. We have some real problems with that here in this state, where we just don't have access to a lot of the things in the healthcare and things like that we wish we did. And getting access to daily, getting to access to your daily meds, granted in a large supply, would definitely be better than trying to, I'm always after my wife to make sure she reorders her medicines 4 days ahead of when she really needs it. And maybe she can squirrel away 3 or 4 of those pills. And pretty soon she's got a small stockpile, and things like that. Because, I mean, I hate to do it, but that's what I'm always thinking. How am I going to get some of these meds if something happens? If she's got 15, 20, 30 days worth saved up, maybe that's good. But that's hard to do these days with insurance and everything else. It's just, they have no sense of humor about that kind of stuff.
Alaska is one of those. There's a few places. Alaska is one of them. It's kind of one of, you want to shake people, and like, there's probably nobody in Alaska that shouldn't have either both a Jase case, and if they're taking daily medications, they should absolutely have a supply. I mean, it's just, you just want to slap people and wake them up. But so I'm glad that was part of the reason. When one of my guys told me about the show, I was like, oh, that's up in Alaska. Yes. So we need to talk to those people. Let's definitely do that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I reached out to several different outlets that do something similar to what you do, and you're the only one that responded. So I'm glad you did, because we need it. We desperately need the access, and we need the information. And so we'd again, give me a few weeks, and we'll touch base with you again and come back to you, and you can be part of another What If Wednesday. Maybe this one a little more on the what if side, again, with radionuclear and biohazard stuff. We could talk a little bit about that as well. So I'm always happy to have your expertise on that. So Dr. Shawn Rowland, thank you so much for coming on board. It's good to talk with you.
Thanks so much for having me. This has been great. Appreciate it.
All right. Appreciate it. Thank you so much. Great discussion, man. That was a good discussion. We got a lot of good information there. I mean, the whole antibiotic ointment, that was worth the price of the show right there. So good stuff. Go check it out. JaseMedical.com. The Jase case is $259.95, $260 per person. You can get the telemedicine. You can get it started. They've got all the information there on the website. And I'm looking forward to having Dr. Rowland back on to talk about some of this other stuff as well. So anyway, that's it for today, folks. We are out of time. Tomorrow is another day. Justin Ruffridge will be our guest, and we'll be talking with him about the legislature, the governor's vetoes, and the capital projects he lost in his district. We'll talk about that as well. All right, my friends, thank you for being part of it. We will see you tomorrow. The Michael Duke Show, Common Sense Radio.
We've shed our terrestrial radio skin, and now we are slimy lizard internet people. It's the Michael Duke Show.